Inside a private technical meeting at Maranello, Ferrari just made a decision that could either deliver Lewis Hamilton his 8th world championship or destroy both their legacies forever. What happened in that room wasn't just another development update. It was Ferrari betting everything on rewriting their DNA around one man, and the implications go far deeper than anyone realizes. Let's rewind to understand how we got here. When Hamilton signed with Ferrari, the narrative was simple: the greatest driver of the modern era joining F1's most iconic team. But 2025 has told a different story entirely. The SF25 was supposed to be Hamilton's launchpad. Winter testing showed promise. Not dominant, but close enough to McLaren to keep things interesting. Fast forward to mid-season, and that optimism has crumbled. Hungary perfectly captured the problem. Hamilton out in Q2, while Charles Leclerc secured pole position. The contrast was brutal. In the post-session interviews, Hamilton called himself useless, a comment many took as pure self-criticism. But here's what most people missed. Hamilton doesn't do public vulnerability by accident. When he showed that frustration, he was highlighting the gap between his talent and the car's cooperation. It was a message to Ferrari as much as it was to the media. The numbers tell the real story. By the summer break, Ferrari had slipped behind McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. Upgrades weren't sticking. New parts produced marginal qualifying gains that faded over long runs. And Hamilton's comfort level with the SF25, it never improved. But what happened next in Maranello will surprise you, because Ferrari's response wasn't what anyone expected. According to sources within Ferrari's technical department, senior engineers held that private meeting I mentioned, and they didn't just acknowledge the problem. They made a fundamental decision that rewrites everything we know about Ferrari's approach to car development. For the first time since Hamilton walked through those famous red doors, Ferrari's 2026 car will be designed around his driving style. Not as a token gesture, not as a "we'll try a few things your way" compromise, but as the central pillar of the entire concept. Think about the significance of this. Ferrari has historically been slow, sometimes stubborn, to pivot away from what it knows. Charles Leclerc has been their reference point for car development for over 5 years. The SF25, the SF24, even going back to the SF21, all built around Leclerc's preference for an incredibly sharp turn-in, even at the expense of rear stability. That's not a problem for Charles. He adapts his driving mid-corner to catch the rear and maintain momentum. But for Hamilton, his style depends on building confidence lap after lap, and that unpredictability costs more than just tenths on the stopwatch. It disrupts his rhythm and limits the range of conditions where he can extract the car's full potential. Here's where it gets interesting. Loïc Serra's arrival from Mercedes becomes critical to this story. As the former head of vehicle dynamics at Brackley, Serra worked with Hamilton through multiple title-winning campaigns. He understands how Hamilton translates feedback into measurable engineering targets, something Ferrari simply hasn't had before. But Ferrari's decision creates a problem they've never faced before, and the solution could determine whether this gamble pays off. The challenge isn't just engineering, it's political. And at Ferrari, those politics are magnified by history, expectation, and the weight of 2 star drivers whose needs aren't perfectly aligned. Charles Leclerc has been the reference point for Maranello's development since 2019. The engineers know his style, his preferred setup parameters, the way he approaches a weekend. For years, the car has been an extension of his feedback loop. That continuity creates efficiency, but it also creates institutional inertia. Hamilton disrupts that comfort zone. His arrival brings a proven methodology that has won championships under very different technical regimes. The strategic challenge for Ferrari is incorporating that methodology without eroding Leclerc's strengths. Go too far toward Hamilton's style, and you risk leaving Charles with a car he has to relearn from scratch. Lean too heavily on Leclerc's preferences, and Hamilton's influence becomes symbolic rather than structural. Other teams have navigated this differently. Red Bull unapologetically builds around Max Verstappen. McLaren pursues a more balanced approach, ensuring both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri can exploit the car's potential. But Ferrari's situation is more delicate. Both drivers expect to fight for wins. The path Ferrari chooses over the next 12 months will determine whether Hamilton and Leclerc become a complementary force or two parallel development streams competing for control. But the real pressure comes from something nobody's talking about: the mathematics of the 2026 regulations. Championships aren't just won on raw speed, they're won on timing. And in 2026, the timing window will be brutally narrow. Under the new regulations, the development race in the opening 4 to 6 rounds will likely decide the title fight's trajectory. Once the budget cap locks in and aerodynamic testing restrictions bite, recovering a major performance deficit mid-season becomes nearly impossible. Run the numbers and the picture gets sharper. In a standard 24-race calendar, dropping even half a second per lap to a front-running package means hemorrhaging 10 to 12 points per weekend. Over the first 5 races, that's a 50 to 60 point hole, more than enough to force a mathematical miracle scenario by mid-season. Hamilton knows this. It's why he keeps stressing consistency over outright qualifying glory. His 7 titles weren't built solely on pole positions. They were built on converting bad weekends into damage limitation. If Ferrari nails the baseline car for 2026, the points model changes completely. Assume an average finishing delta of +2 positions per race over 24 rounds. That's roughly a 96-point swing compared to their 2025 average, enough to take a title fight to Abu Dhabi against any rival. But here's the catch: early development efficiency. Every simulation lap, every wind tunnel run completed in the next 12 months carries exponentially more value, because 2026 represents a full reset. The really fascinating part? Ferrari's rivals are already preparing their countermeasures. The Formula One paddock never operates in isolation. The moment word filters through that Ferrari's 2026 concept bears Hamilton's fingerprints, Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull will shift into countermeasure mode. Mercedes will be watching with particular interest. Toto Wolff knows Hamilton's feedback patterns as well as anyone. If those traits become embedded in Ferrari's car, Brackley's engineers will already be running anti-Hamilton simulations, focusing on track types where his setup philosophy might be vulnerable. McLaren's approach will be different. Andrea Stella has built a culture around flexibility. If Ferrari's 2026 package leans too heavily into Hamilton's preferences, McLaren will likely double down on producing a chassis with the widest possible operating window. And Red Bull have made an art form out of designing cars around one driver. If Ferrari shows early signs of a championship-level package, Red Bull won't hesitate to bring forward planned upgrades to crush momentum before it builds. This is the reality Hamilton is stepping into. The moment Ferrari commits to his vision, the rest of the grid will begin plotting to dismantle it. If Ferrari gets 2026 right, the ripple effect could extend far beyond a single season. A Hamilton championship wouldn't just end a title drought, it would reset the perception of what modern Ferrari stands for. For Hamilton's legacy, the stakes are even higher. An 8th title in red wouldn't just break the all-time record, it would do so with the team that has defined Formula One's mythos. It would place him in the rare company of drivers like Juan Manuel Fangio, who won championships with multiple constructors under radically different rule sets. The inverse is equally true. If Ferrari's 2026 gamble falters, the narrative could swing to suggest that even Hamilton's genius couldn't crack Maranello's structural issues. Ferrari's decision to hand Lewis Hamilton the keys to their 2026 concept isn't a tweak, it's a declaration. They're betting that the most successful driver of the modern era can guide them through a regulation reset and back to the summit. In a year's time, the first preseason shakedown laps in Bahrain will tell us if that gamble paid off. Every camera will be trained on Hamilton's first braking zone, on how the car changes direction, on his first debrief back in the garage? Is there that subtle nod to the engineer that says, "Yes, this is what I wanted"? Or does the body language hint at another season of compromises? One way or another, 2026 is shaping up to be the collision point between legacy and opportunity, between a team's search for redemption and a driver's pursuit of history. What do you think? Will Ferrari finally have the courage and the car to fight for it all? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want more insider analysis like this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. The 2026 season is going to be unmissable.